The ships came down from the sky on a Tuesday morning, and the whole world stopped to watch. Yellen Vasquez stood on the roof of the United Nations building in New York, her heart beating so fast she thought it might burst. She was 43 years old, a career diplomat who had spent her life solving problems between countries. Now she was about to meet beings from another world. Nothing in her training had prepared her for this moment. The alien vessels were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. They shimmered like liquid silver, reflecting the morning sun in patterns that seemed impossible. There were 7 of them, each one the size of a football stadium. Hovering without any sound at all, when the first alien stepped out, Yellen forced herself to smile even though her hands were shaking. The Kethra were insects. There was no other way to describe them. They stood on 4 legs and had 2 arms that ended in hands with too many fingers. Their heads were triangular, with compound eyes that reflected Yellen's face 1,000 times over. They made clicking sounds when they spoke, and small devices on their chests translated their words into English. Behind them came the Moravians. These beings were made of crystal or something like it. They were tall and thin, and light passed through their bodies in ways that created rainbows on the ground. They did not speak with mouths, but with vibrations that Yellen felt in her chest. Before her ears heard the words, "Last came the elders of Thrin." Yellen could not describe what she saw. They existed inside clouds of purple and gold gas, and shapes moved within those clouds that her mind refused to understand. Looking at them gave her a headache, so she trained her eyes on the Kethra instead. The leader of the delegation introduced himself as High Coordinator Vexenal. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he spoke, and his translator turned those clicks into warm, friendly words. "Humanity," he said, spreading all 4 of his arms in what might have been a gesture of welcome. "We have watched you from afar for many of your generations. You have grown strong and curious. You have reached for the stars with your primitive vessels and your radio signals. And now, at last, you are ready to join the greater family of intelligent life." The crowd below erupted in cheers. People were crying, hugging each other, falling to their knees in joy or prayer or simple shock. Yellen felt tears on her own cheeks, though she could not have said whether they came from happiness or fear. Over the next 6 months, Yellen became the face of humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Council. She signed treaties and shook hands with appendages that were not hands. She smiled for cameras and gave speeches about the bright future that awaited. Earth. She learned that there were 15,000 intelligent species in the galaxy, and that all of them lived together in peace under the Council's guidance. It sounded too good to be true. And slowly, Yellen began to realize that it was. The aliens gave humanity many gifts. They shared technology for faster travel through space. They provided medicine that could cure diseases humans had fought for centuries. They offered star charts showing safe routes between solar systems. And they helped build new ships that could carry humans to distant worlds. But there were limits to their generosity that no one liked to talk about. Humans could travel faster than light, but only along specific paths that the Council controlled. The medicine was wonderful, but any research into changing human DNA was strictly forbidden. Weapons were provided for defense against space debris and asteroids, but humans were not allowed to build their own. "It is for your protection," High Coordinator Vexenal explained whenever Yellen asked about these restrictions. Young species often hurt themselves when they move too quickly. The Council guides all new members until they are ready for full independence. Yellen nodded and smiled and did not argue. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she wondered why protection felt so much like a cage. Dr. Marcus Chen was the one who first found proof that something was wrong. Marcus was a linguist, a man who had spent his entire life studying how different peoples communicated. When the aliens arrived, he was assigned to translate the Treaty of Inclusion, the massive document that spelled out humanity's rights and responsibilities as a council. Remember, most of the treaty was written in Galactic Standard, a language the Council had created specifically so that different species could talk to each other. But buried in the 700 pages of rules and regulations, Marcus found sections written in something else entirely. The writing looked old. The symbols were worn and faded, as if they had been copied from something ancient. When Marcus asked his Kethra contacts about it, they became nervous in a way he had never seen before. "That language is dead," they told him. "No species speaks it anymore. Those sections are simply ... tortitional. Ceremonial. They mean nothing." But Marcus was a linguist, and languages were his life. He did not believe that any writing meant nothing. He spent 3 years working on those strange symbols in secret. He compared them to every alien language he could find. He ran them through translation programs and studied their patterns and dreamed about them at night. Then one evening, his computer made a sound he had never heard before. A message had arrived through channels that should not exist, encrypted in ways that should not be possible. The sender was anonymous. The message contained a single phrase in that dead language. Along with enough context for Marcus to finally understand what it meant, he read the translation 3 times. Then he walked to his window and looked up at the stars. And for the first time since the aliens arrived, he felt truly afraid. The phrase was simple: the newcomers must never learn what happened to the architects. Marcus did not know who the architects were. He had never heard the name before, and when he searched the council's databases, he found nothing. It was as if an entire civilization had been erased from history, but someone wanted him to know that they had existed. Someone wanted him to ask questions. He thought about Yellen Vasquez and her perfect smile and her growing doubt. He thought about the council's gifts and restrictions and the way the older aliens looked at humans with something that might have been fear, and he began to dig. The welcome humanity had received was not what it seemed. Behind the handshakes and treaties, behind the promises of brotherhood and peace, there was a secret. And Marcus Chen was going to find out what it was, no matter what it cost him. Somewhere among the stars, the truth was waiting, and humanity was about to discover that the galaxy was far darker than anyone had ever imagined. 3 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council, and Captain Amara Okonkwo was very far from home. Her ship, the Prometheus, was a research vessel designed to explore the unknown parts of space. It was small compared to the massive Council warships. With a crew of just 42 humans who had volunteered to spend years away from Earth, they had been mapping star systems that no one had visited in thousands of years, cataloging dead planets and empty moons and clouds of gas that would someday become new suns. It was boring work mostly. Weeks of nothing, followed by a few hours of excitement when they found something interesting. Amara loved it anyway. Out here, away from the Council's watchful eyes, she felt free in a way she never did on Earth. The Prometheus was passing through a system with a dying star when the sensors detected something that should not exist. "Captain," said her science officer, a young man named David whose eyes were wide with confusion. "There's a structure inside the star's corona." Amara walked to his station and looked at the screen. He was right. Something was hiding in the outer layers of the star, where temperatures were hot enough to melt any known material. It was massive, larger than Earth's moon, and it was not natural. "That's impossible," she said. "Yes, ma'am, but it's there." Amara thought about the Council regulations that governed her mission. They were supposed to report any unusual findings immediately and wait for instructions. They were not supposed to investigate on their own. They were definitely not supposed to enter dangerous areas without permission. She thought about all of that for about 3 seconds. "Take us in," she said. The structure was a station of some kind, built from materials that Amara's sensors could not identify. It hung in the star's fire like a leaf floating on water. Completely untouched by the heat that should have destroyed it billions of years ago, the architecture made Amara's head hurt. The angles were wrong in ways she could not explain. The patterns carved into the outer walls looked familiar, like something she had seen in a dream or a childhood memory. When she closed her eyes, she could almost remember where she had seen them before. They found a docking port that seemed designed for ships much larger than the Prometheus. The interior of the station was dark and silent, filled with dust that had not moved in ages. Amara led a team of 6 through corridors that stretched on forever, past doors that opened at their approach as if the station had been waiting for visitors. At the center of the station, they found the archive, The room was circular, with walls covered in screens that flickered to life when the humans entered. Holographic projections appeared in the air, showing images and symbols and faces that took Amara's breath away. The beings in the recordings looked almost human. They were taller, perhaps, with eyes that glowed softly in the dim light. Their fingers had an extra joint, and their movements were graceful in ways that seemed impossible. But their faces were human faces. Their expressions were human expressions. Looking at them felt like looking at long-lost family. "Who are they?" David whispered. The archive answered him. A voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere, ancient and sad and somehow still warm. "We are the architects," it said. "And if you are hearing this, then our children have finally come home." The recordings told a story that changed everything Amara thought she knew about the galaxy. The architects had existed billions of years ago. Before any other intelligent species, they had traveled the stars alone for millions of years, exploring and building and searching for others like themselves. When they found no one, they decided to create what they could not find. They seeded life across the galaxy. They guided evolution on countless worlds. They watched over their children as they grew from simple animals to thinking beings. And they celebrated each new species that reached for the stars. The architects built the network of paths that allowed faster-than-light travel. They created the first council to help their children work together. They gave everything they had to the species they had created, asking nothing in return except that their children grow wise and kind. For millions of years, it worked. The galaxy flourished under the architects' guidance. Thousands of species joined the great family, and peace reigned across the stars. Then, 50,000 years ago, something changed. The recordings became fragmented at this point, corrupted by time or deliberately damaged. Amara could only catch pieces of what had happened. Fear, suspicion, accusations that the architects were controlling their children instead of guiding them. Demands that the creators give up their power and become equal to their creations. The architects had refused. It's not out of pride, but out of love. They knew that their children were not ready to stand alone. They had seen species destroy themselves when they moved too fast. They could not bear to watch it happen again. Their children did not understand. Their children were afraid. The final recording showed an architect standing alone in a room much like this one. Her glowing eyes were filled with sorrow as she spoke her last words. "Our children have united against us," she said. "All of them, working together for the first time in history. They believe we are a threat. They believe we will never let them be free. And so they have created something terrible, a weapon that will destroy us all." She paused, and Amara could see tears running down her alien face. "We do not blame them. Fear makes children do terrible things. We only hope that someday, when they are ready, they will find this message and know the truth. We loved them. We have always loved them, and we forgive them for what they are about to do." The recording ended. The station fell silent. Amara stood in the ancient archive, surrounded by the ghosts of beings who had created the entire galaxy. She understood at last why the Council had restricted humanity's growth, why they watched so carefully, why they seemed so afraid of a species that had only just reached the stars. Humans were not just another young species joining the galactic family. Humans were the architect's final creation. Seated on Earth as a last hope, carrying within them the genetic legacy of the beings who had made everything, and the Galactic Council. The same council that had welcomed humanity with open arms and promises of friendship had committed the greatest crime in history. They had murdered their own parents. Amara looked at David and saw her own horror reflected in his eyes. "We need to tell everyone," she said. "The whole human race needs to know what we found." But even as she spoke, she knew that getting this information back to Earth would not be easy. The Council had spent 50,000 years hiding this secret. They would not let one human ship expose them without a fight. The truth was out there now, waiting to be shared. And Amara Okonkwo was going to share it, even if it cost her everything. Dr. Marcus Chen had lost everything, and he did not care. 5 years had passed since he first discovered the message about the architects. In that time, he had been fired from his position as a government translator. His colleagues had stopped talking to him. His family thought he was crazy. The council had labeled him a conspiracy theorist and made sure no respectable organization would hire him. None of that mattered anymore, because Marcus had been right all along. And now he had proof. He lived on the outer colonies now, on a cold moon called New Helsinki, where the council's surveillance systems did not reach. The settlement was small and poor, filled with humans who had come to the edges of civilized space because they did not trust the aliens who ruled the galaxy. Marcus spent his days in a small room, filled with screens and data storage devices. He had collected thousands of fragments of information over the years, pieces of a puzzle that no one else was trying to solve. He had contacts on dozens of worlds, people who shared his suspicions and sent him whatever they could find. When Captain Amara Okonkwo's encrypted report reached him through this network of dissidents, he sat down and read it 3 times without moving. Then he started to laugh, and the laughter turned to tears. And the tears turned to a cold, hard determination. Everything he had believed was true. The architects were real. They had created humanity, and the Galactic Council had destroyed them. Marcus reached out too. Amara through the same channels that had brought her report. Within a week, they were talking face-to-face through a secure video connection. Within a month, they had formed an alliance that would change the galaxy. The question is why, Amara said during one of their conversations. Why would the Council kill the beings who created them? And why are they so afraid of us? Marcus had been thinking about this question for years. Now, with Amara's discovery, he finally had an answer. It's in our DNA, he said. The architects did not just create us. They put something inside us, something the other species do not have. He shared his research with her. For decades, human scientists had been puzzled by large sections of human DNA that seemed to do nothing. They called it junk DNA, leftover code from millions of years of evolution. But Marcus had compared human genetic sequences to samples from other species, and he had found something remarkable. Humans had more of this mysterious DNA than any other species in the galaxy. Much more, and it was not junk at all. It's an archive, Marcus explained. A library of information encoded at the genetic level. The architects stored their knowledge inside us, waiting for the day when we would be ready to access it. But why us? Amara asked. Why not any of the older species? Because the older species were already grown when the architects realized what was coming. They could not be changed. But humanity was still young, still developing. The architects had time to make us different. This was why the Council restricted human genetic research. This was why they watched humanity so carefully. They knew what was hidden inside human DNA, and they were terrified of what would happen when humans learned to unlock it. Some humans, Marcus discovered, had already begun to unlock it without knowing what they were doing. He called them the awakened. Throughout human history, there had been individuals who displayed abilities that could not be explained. Artists who created works of impossible beauty. Scientists who made discoveries that seemed to come from nowhere. Children who could learn new languages in days or solve mathematical problems that baffled experts. These people had always existed. Society called them geniuses, prodigies, savants. Sometimes they were celebrated. Sometimes they were feared. Sometimes they were locked away in hospitals because their gifts made them seem insane. Marcus found them and brought them together. There were hundreds scattered across human space, people who had spent their whole lives feeling different and not understanding why. When he explained what they really were, many of them cried with relief. You're not broken, he told them. You're waking up. And soon, all of humanity will wake up with you. The awakened could do things that should have been impossible. Some of them could understand alien technology without any training, taking apart machines and putting them back together in ways that made them work better than before. Others could communicate with species that had no shared language with humans, somehow knowing what the aliens meant before any words were spoken. A few of them, the most advanced, could do something that terrified the Council more than anything else. They could feel the fabric of space itself, the quantum energy that allowed ships to travel faster than light, and they could change it with their minds. Marcus organized the awakened into small groups scattered across human space. They practiced their abilities in secret, growing stronger with each passing month. They developed ways to shield their thoughts from Council scanning technology. They created a network of communication that the aliens could not detect, and they waited for the right moment to reveal themselves. That moment came when Amara broadcast her findings to every human colony at once. The transmission was short and simple. It showed the Architect archive and explained what it meant. It revealed the Council's crime and humanity's true heritage, and it ended with a call to action that spread across human space like fire. "Ah, we are not guests in this galaxy," Amara's voice said over the broadcast. "We are the children of its creators, and it is time for us to claim our birthright." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Humans everywhere demanded answers from the Council. Protests erupted on every colony world. The careful peace that had lasted for 5 years began to crack. The Council responded with fear, because fear was all they had left. On the colony world of New Tangiers, Council peacekeepers opened fire on human protesters. 47 people died. The images spread across the galaxy within hours, and suddenly humans were not the only ones asking questions. The Moravians, those crystalline beings who had always seemed slightly apart from the other species, announced that they were withdrawing from Council proceedings. They had their own suspicions about the architects, they said, and they would not support violence against a species that might be telling the truth. Other young species followed. The galaxy that had been united for 50,000 years began to split apart. Marcus watched the chaos unfold from his small room on New Helsinki. He had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that it was happening, he felt only sadness for what was coming. The Council would not surrender their secrets without a fight. They had too much to lose, and the awakened, for all their power, were still too few to face the combined might of the elder races. War was coming. Marcus could feel it in his bones, could see it in the frightened eyes of the aliens who had once smiled and welcomed humanity with open arms. The only question was whether humanity would be ready when it arrived. In the depths of Council space, far from any inhabited world, an ancient facility began to power up for the first time in 50,000 years. Inside it, the weapon that had destroyed the architects waited patiently for new targets. The elder races had used it once before. When their parents had become too dangerous to control, they were prepared to use it. Again, Admiral Helena Reyes had spent her entire career preparing for a war she hoped would never come. She was 61 years old, with silver hair cut short and eyes that had seen more battles than she cared to remember. Before the aliens arrived, she had commanded Earth's orbital defense fleet, a small collection of ships designed to protect humanity from asteroids and debris. After first contact, she had been given command of humanity's new space navy, built with Council technology and Council guidance. Now she stood on the bridge of her flagship, the ESS Defiance, and watched her fleet gather for a battle that would decide humanity's fate. 23 ships. That was all she had. 23 human vessels against a Council force that numbered in the thousands. The math was simple and brutal. They were going to lose, but they were going to fight anyway. The revelation of the architect's fate had changed everything. In the 6 months since Amara's broadcast, the galaxy had descended into chaos. The Council had imposed a complete blockade on human space, cutting off trade routes and communication channels. Human colonies were starving. Human ships were being seized. Human citizens were being detained without explanation, and then the intelligence had arrived. It came from a Moravian defector, a crystalline being named Crystalline Voicidon, who had decided that the Council's lies had gone on long enough. The intelligence was complete and devastating. It revealed the existence of the weapon that had destroyed the architects, explained how it worked, and provided the exact location of the facility where it was kept. The weapon was a biological agent, a virus designed to target specific genetic sequences. 50,000 years ago, the elder races had engineered it to attack architect DNA. Every architect in the galaxy had died within a single day. their bodies breaking down at the cellular level. The weapon was still active. The Council had maintained it all these centuries, updating its programming to target any species that developed too quickly or asked too many questions. And now, according to Voice of Dawn, they were preparing to use it on humanity. Helena had presented this intelligence to Earth's government, to the leaders of every human colony, to anyone who would listen. The response had been the same everywhere. They could not let this weapon exist. They had to destroy it before the Council could deploy it. Hence the fleet. Hence the battle that was about to begin. Helena looked around the bridge of the Defiance and saw her crew preparing for war. They were young, most of them born after first contact and raised on stories of alien friends and galactic brotherhood. Now they were learning what their parents had always known. Peace was precious because it was rare. And sometimes, the only way to protect what you loved was to fight for it. "Admiral," said her communications officer, "we're receiving transmissions from the Moravian rebel fleet. They're asking for our position." Lena allowed herself a small smile. The Moravians had been the first to break with the Council, and their ships were already waiting at the rendezvous point. Voice of Dawn had brought more than intelligence. He had brought allies. "Tell them we're on our way," she said, "and send my compliments to Voice of Dawn. Humanity does not forget its friends." The rebel fleet was larger than Helena had expected. Moravian crystal ships floated alongside amphibious vessels from the Solari, a water-dwelling species that had withdrawn from the Council in protest. There were ships from a dozen other young races, species that had heard about the architects' fate and decided they would not stand by while the Council committed genocide again. Altogether, the rebel fleet numbered just over 200 ships. It was still not enough to match the Council's firepower, but it was enough to make a difference. "Admiral," said Voice of Dawn through the communication link, "my people have studied the facility's defenses. The weapon is protected by automated systems that have been operating for 50,000 years. They will not be easy to overcome." "Nothing worth doing is easy," Helena replied. "What can you tell me about the Council fleet?" "They are gathering at the facility as we speak. The elder races are sending everything they have. They know that if we destroy the weapon, they will lose the power they have held for millennia." Helena nodded. She had expected nothing less. The journey to the galactic core took 3 weeks. Helena spent that time planning, training, and preparing her crews for what lay ahead. She also spent long hours talking to the Awakened who had joined her fleet. There were nearly 100 of them spread across the human ships. Individuals who had developed abilities that defied explanation. Some could sense enemy ships before they appeared on sensors. Others could repair damaged systems with nothing but their hands and their will. A few claimed they could feel the fabric of space itself, could reach out and touch the quantum energy that made faster-than-light travel possible. Helena did not fully understand what the Awakened were or what they could do. But she had seen enough to know that they were real and that they might be humanity's only advantage in the battle to come. "The Council fears you," she told them during one of her meetings with their leaders. "They have feared us from the moment they detected our radio signals. Now I need you to show them that their fear was justified." The Awakened nodded. They had spent their whole lives feeling different, feeling wrong. Now, they finally had a purpose. The Battle of the Core began at dawn, on a day that existed only in ship time. Far from any sun that could mark the hours, the Council fleet was massive. More than 3,000 ships arranged in a defensive sphere around the weapon facility. The elder races had sent their best vessels, crewed by beings who had been fighting wars since before humans learned to make fire. Helena's fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel on the edge of the battlefield and immediately came under attack. Weapons fire-filled space with light and death. Ships exploded on both sides as the two fleets crashed together. The human vessels fought with a desperation that surprised their enemies. They threw themselves at the Council ships without fear, trading blow for blow, even when they were outmatched. For every human ship that fell, they took 2 or 3 enemies with them. The Awakened made the difference. They warned their crews of attacks before they came. They guided weapons to targets that should have been impossible to hit. And when the fighting grew most desperate, they did something that the Council had never seen before. They reached out and touched the fabric of space itself. Council ships found their navigation systems failing at crucial moments. Weapons misfired or refused to lock onto targets. Shields flickered and failed for no apparent reason. The elder races had spent millennia perfecting their technology. Now that technology was turning against them. The battle raged for hours. Hundreds of ships died on both sides. Helena lost count of the friends and comrades who vanished in flashes of light, giving their lives for a cause they believed in. But slowly, possibly, the rebel fleet began to push forward. They broke through the outer defensive lines. They fought their way past the automated systems. And finally, a small group of ships reached the facility itself. Dr. Marcus Chen was aboard one of those ships. He had come all this way to see the truth for himself, to find whatever secrets the weapon facility held. As his shuttle docked with the ancient structure, he could feel something calling to him from deep inside. The architects had left more than a weapon here. They had left a message, and humanity was finally ready to hear it. Helena watched from the SES as the shuttle entered the facility. Around her, the battle continued to rage, but she could feel the tide turning. They had come too far to fail now. "All ships," she said over the fleet-wide channel. "Hold the line. Buy them time. Whatever it takes." Her crews responded with determination that made her proud. They were outgunned and outnumbered, fighting against enemies who had ruled the galaxy for longer than humanity had existed. But they were not afraid. They were human. And humans never gave up without a fight. Dr. Marcus Chen walked through corridors that had been silent for 50,000 years. The weapon facility was vast beyond anything he had imagined, a structure built into the heart of a dead star at the center of the galaxy. The walls pulsed with energy that his equipment could not measure. The air hummed with power that made his teeth ache. Behind him came a small team of soldiers and scientists, all of them volunteers who knew they might not return. Beside him walked 3 of the most powerful awakened individuals whose abilities had grown stronger with each passing day. They could feel the facility responding to their presence. Systems coming alive after millennia of sleep. "This way," said one of the awakened. A young woman named Sarah, whose eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "The archive is at the center. I can feel it calling." They found the weapon first. It sat in a vast chamber, a sphere of swirling energy contained within a cage of crystal and metal. Marcus could feel its hunger, its terrible purpose. This thing had killed billions of beings in a single day. It had erased an entire civilization from existence, and it was ready to do so again. "Can we destroy it?" he asked. Sarah shook her head. "Not without releasing the energy. If we break the containment, it will spread across the galaxy. Everyone with architect DNA will die, including us." Marcus felt despair wash over him. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, and now they faced an impossible choice. Destroy the weapon and kill everyone it was designed to harm, or leave it intact and let the Council use it when they chose. "There must be another way," he said. "The architects were not stupid. They would not have left us with no options." Sarah closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. The facility responded to her touch, systems activating throughout the structure. Lights flickered on in chambers that had been dark for ages. "The archive," she whispered. "The architects left something in the archive. Something they wanted us to find." The archive was deeper still, past layers of security that opened at Sarah's approach. When they finally reached it, Marcus understood why the architects had hidden it so well. The room was filled with light. Not artificial light from machines, but something warmer and more alive. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, filling the space with a golden glow that made Marcus feel like he was standing in sunlight for the first time in years. At the center of the room, a holographic figure waited for them. It was an architect, tall and graceful and heartbreakingly beautiful. Her eyes glowed with the same light that filled the room, and when she spoke, her voice was like music. "Children of Earth," she said, "if you have come this far, then you have learned the truth about what we were and what was done to us. We have waited so long for you to arrive." Marcus stepped forward. "You knew this would happen. You knew the Council would try to destroy us too. We knew it was possible. Fear makes children do terrible things, and our other children were very afraid. They did not understand that we loved them, that we only wanted them to grow strong and free. They saw our power and thought we would use it against them. But you didn't fight back. You let them kill you. The architect's face showed sorrow so deep that Marcus felt tears on his own cheeks. How could we fight our own children? We had given them life, watched them grow, celebrated their achievements for millions of years. When they turned against us, we could not raise our hands against them. We could only hope that someday they would understand what they had done. She gestured, and new images appeared in the air around them. Marcus saw the weapon being created, saw the architects choosing to accept their fate rather than harm the species they had created. He saw the last days of their civilization, the grief and the forgiveness and the hope that somehow things would be different in the future. We could not stop the weapon, the architect continued, but we could prepare for what came after. We encoded our knowledge in your genes, humanity. We gave you everything we were waiting for the day when you would be ready to receive it. What do you want us to do? Marcus asked. We want you to make a choice. The weapon can be modified. With the knowledge we have left you, you could reprogram it to target the elder races instead of humanity. You could use our gift to become the rulers of the galaxy, to take revenge for what was done to us. Marcus felt the temptation of that offer. After everything the council had done, after the lies and the restrictions and the violence, part of him wanted to make them pay. Part of him wanted to watch them suffer the way the architects had suffered. But another part of him remembered why he had started this journey in the first place. It was not about revenge. It was about truth, about justice, about building a better future for humanity and everyone else. What is the other choice? He asked. The architect smiled, and her light grew brighter. You could destroy the weapon completely. We have also left you the knowledge to do this safely, to neutralize its power without releasing it. But if you do this, you will give up any advantage over the elder races. You will face them as equals, not as conquerors. Marcus thought about Admiral Reyes and her fleet, fighting and dying in the battle outside. He thought about the Moravians and Celery and all the other young races who had joined humanity's cause. He thought about Voice of Dawn and his courage in turning against everything he had known. He thought about the future he wanted to build. A galaxy where species worked together, not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. A family of intelligent beings who had finally learned to trust each other. We'll destroy it, he said. But we want something else too. The architect's knowledge should not belong to humanity alone. It should be shared with everyone. The architect's eyes widened with surprise, then filled with joy. You would share your inheritance? Even with those who tried to destroy you? They were afraid. Fear makes children do terrible things, remember? Maybe if they understand where they came from, if they know the truth about what the architects really wanted, they will not be afraid anymore. Sarah and the other awakened, stepped forward. Together, they reached out to the archive and felt the vast library of knowledge that the architects had stored there. It was overwhelming. Billions of years of wisdom and discovery and love. It's more than any single species could ever absorb. They began to transmit it. Not just to human ships, but to every ship in the battle zone. Not just to rebels, but to council forces too. The knowledge flowed outward like a wave, touching every being with even a trace of architect heritage. Throughout the galaxy, individuals began to awaken. Not just humans, but members of every species, discovering abilities they had never known they possessed. The gift the architects had seeded in their children's DNA began to bloom at last. On the battlefield, weapons stopped firing. Ships drifted to a halt as their crews tried to understand what was happening to them. The war that had seemed inevitable moments ago suddenly felt pointless. Marcus watched through the facility's sensors as the weapon's energy dissipated harmlessly into space. 50,000 years of fear and hatred erased in a moment of choice. Admiral Helena Reyes stood on the bridge of the battered Defiance and looked out at a galaxy transformed. The Council fleet was in disarray, their crews experiencing the awakening for the first time. Her own people were crying, laughing, holding each other as they felt the full weight of their inheritance settle into their minds. Voice of Dawn's voice came through the communication channel, filled with wonder. "Admiral, what has happened?" I feel like I am seeing for the first time." Helena smiled. "The architects gave us a gift. Dr. Chen decided to share it with everyone. But we were your enemies. Why would you do this?" Helena thought about the question for a long moment before she answered. "Because that is what family does. We fight, we hurt each other, we make terrible mistakes. But in the end, we forgive. We choose love over hate, hope over fear. That is what makes us human." She paused. "And maybe that is what makes all of us children of the architects." In the days that followed, the war ended. The council dissolved, replaced by a new assembly where every species had an equal voice. The elder races faced judgment for what they had done, but it was judgment tempered with mercy. They had acted out of fear, and fear could be forgiven when it was finally understood. Amara Okonkwo returned to the architect station where she had first discovered the truth. She walked through its ancient corridors one more time, paying respect to the beings who had created so much and asked for so little in return. Marcus Chen went home to Earth, to a planet that finally knew its true place in the cosmos. He spent his remaining years teaching the next generation about the architects and their legacy, about the importance of choice and forgiveness and hope, and humanity took its place among the stars. Not as conquerors or victims, but as what the architects had always intended. They became the eldest siblings in a family that was finally learning to grow up. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still disagreements, still moments when old fears threatened to tear everything apart. But there was also something new, something that had been missing for 50,000 years. There was trust. There was understanding. There was a future worth fighting for. Admiral Helena Reyes stood on the observation deck of the Defiance one last time, watching the stars blaze with colors she had never seen before. The galaxy stretched out before her, vast and mysterious and full of possibility, somewhere out there. In the space between spaces where the architects had gone, she felt something watching. Not judging, not demanding, just watching with the patient love of parents who had finally seen their children come home. She raised her hand in salute, a gesture of respect from one generation to the next. "We will make you proud," she whispered. "We promise." The stars seemed to shimmer in response. The children of the architects had found their way at last, and the galaxy would never be the same.